Give me 1 second. Sorry, everyone. Give me just 1 second. Okay. Okay, there we are. Let's get started. Good morning, everybody. You are here today for the Advanced Clean Car 2 stakeholder meeting. This follows the high-level kickoff meeting we had last week, run by our Assistant Commissioner Paul Baldoff, and he ran through during that meeting several different rules and initiatives that we are going to pursue as part of NJ Pact Phase 2. This one is specific to Advanced Clean Cars 2. So the fine print, today's meeting is being recorded. It will be available online. All the presented materials will also be available online, so we will have this PowerPoint uploaded later today or tomorrow. This is for informational purposes only. The things that we are going to talk about today are just our ideas, and they are being discussed. They do not reflect our final decisions or the final content of the proposal. As a courtesy to everyone, because it's less distracting, please turn off your camera and your microphone. If you have a question and would like to speak, please raise your hand when we get for questions, but please wait to speak until you are called. So just in terms of the format, we're going to run through a presentation that should take about half an hour, 40 minutes maybe. We'll then pause for questions about the presentation, and then we'll move into a larger discussion with aided by some specific prompt questions that we have developed. So if you could hold your questions until we get through the presentation, and it would be helpful if you don't put questions in the chat box. Let's see, and if we're unable to get to your question, you can feel free to send your comments to this email address that's provided here by April 15th, please. As I said, the purpose of today's meeting is to talk about a next phase in our NJ Pact, protecting against climate threats. The purpose of today's presentation is to stakeholder whether we should propose to adopt Advanced Clean Cars 2. Also being mindful that under the Clean Air Act, we are preempted from making significant changes to California's rule on which this proposal would potentially be based. So keep that in mind when thinking about your questions and comments. So let's just jump in with 2 quick refreshers on our air quality. I think you all know that transportation is the largest single source of greenhouse gases in New Jersey, coming in at 39%. Slightly down from the last inventory, which was 42%. And of course, the other criteria pollutants remain as important as greenhouse gas and climate change. You can see the percentages here. Transportation continues to make up a significant portion of our PM 2.5 and NOx inventory. So what steps have we taken to date to prepare for electric vehicles and this transition to a zero carbon future? This chart here shows the growth of electric vehicle registration over the years. Right now we have approximately 80,000, a little bit over 80,000, almost 90,000 electric vehicles registered in the state. That is still a small percentage. Oh, somebody took control of the presentation. Let's see. Okay, let's get back on track. There we are. Monica and Jung, can you still see? No, it went away.
Yes.
Oh, yes. Amy is saying no. Amy cannot see. Okay.
Amy might need to come out. She might need to exit and come back in.
Can another external participant let me know if you can see the slides? Okay, yes, Kathy Harris can see them. Yes. Okay, yes, okay.
Yes.
Amy, I'm sorry. Can you drop and rejoin? I'll talk slowly. Okay, so right now we have about 90,000 electric vehicles registered that while the growth has been significant, as you can see on this chart, it's still just a small percentage of our total population of light duty vehicles on the road today, which comes in around a little bit over 6 million. We have multiple incentive programs throughout the state for light-duty electric vehicles. I'm not going to walk through all of these, but I think just the length of this list speaks to the amount of effort that we've put into trying to make sure that our incentives and policies support the regulations that are on the books and the regulations that we are considering proposing. Here are some of the hard numbers, which also I'm not going to read to you if that's okay. Statewide, all of our state agencies have worked to award over $70 million to support the adoption, access to, and charging for light-duty electric vehicles. We have a tremendous number of light-duty level 2 charging stations as well as fast charging stations throughout the state. And over 330,000 light-duty EVs have been incentivized since we started in 2019, or under the Murphy administration. We started before that. We also, in partnership with New Jersey DOT, have applied for formula funding under the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program. We submitted our deployment plan, which was approved. Over the next 4 years, we will be receiving $104 million to deploy fast chargers on our most heavily trafficked corridors. Okay, so let's jump into what we are going to be talking about today. So California adopted Advanced Clean Cars 1 in 2012, and that covered model years 2017 to 2025. It also included light-duty, low-emission vehicle requirements, zero-emission vehicle requirements, and greenhouse gas requirements. So it was not just a purchase requirement or a sales requirement for zero-emission vehicles. The program ramped up to a 22% annual ZEV requirement in 2025. Advanced Clean Cars 2 was adopted by California late last year. It refined the low emission vehicle standards and also imposed a new timeline to ratchet up the number of zero emission vehicles that a manufacturer was required to sell, starting with 35%, going up to 100% by 2035. It also introduced environmental justice flexibilities so that manufacturers could earn additional ZEV values. The next couple slides, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Rob Schell, to talk through some of the more technical pieces of this. And Rob, just tell me when you're ready for me to move to the next one.
Okay, I'll take care of it. So the next few slides we borrowed from CARB. There's no point in reinventing this since it's their program. This one is just a very high-level overview of the main pieces of the ACC2. Building on the base of ZEV stringency, they've made improvements on what they consider to be high-quality ZEVs, and we'll talk about those more in a second. And on top of that is an improvement to the emissions profile from combustion vehicles, and wrapped inside of the whole, on top of the whole thing are benefits to equity and environmental justice communities. Next slide, please. So this is a very brief summary of some of the changes to the LEV, the combustion engine requirements. This is, they talk about new standards to reduce tailpipe emissions during aggressive driving and cold starts, more stringent evaporative emissions, and better emission control for medium duty. For those who aren't familiar with the medium duty passenger vehicle category, that's included in the LEV regulations. It's vehicles between 8,500 and 10,000 pounds, some of the heavier SUVs, and we even have things like Rolls and Bentleys that are over 8,500 pounds that are still passenger vehicles. So it's a little odd category when I talk about medium duty vehicles. So mostly that's SUVs and pickups that fall into that range. So there are some improvements to the tailpipe and evaporative profiles from low emission vehicles, internal combustion engine vehicles, but a lot of this regulation focuses on ZEVs, which would be next slide, please. So this is a kind of a busy slide, but I have some notes here. I'm going to kind of step through some of the new ZEV requirements that CARB is imposing. First is a minimum range. They're looking at a 200-mile on California test cycle minimum range for plug-in electric vehicle for full battery electric vehicles, and at least 70 miles for plug-in hybrid vehicles. So this means that some of the plug-in hybrid vehicles that are now sold that have a range of 10, 20, 30 miles wouldn't qualify as a zero emission vehicle. They need to get at least 70 miles range. They've added some durability requirements. Vehicles need to maintain 80% of their certified range for 10 years or 150,000 miles. They've added a warranty requirement on the batteries of 8 years and 100,000 miles. Today's zero emission vehicles only have whatever warranty the manufacturer imposes, which is in this range, but there's no mandated requirements. So this would actually mandate a battery warranty. The cars also have, and this is an 80% of range as defined by the state of health indicator. A requirement that's not noted here is that all the cars the newer ZEVs have to come with a state of health indicator that is accessible to the driver. So the driver will know somewhere on the dashboard or somewhere on some display that they can access what the actual battery health is, and know it's like, oh, I've got 95% of my battery left or something like that. All the vehicles are also have to be supplied with an onboard charger of at least 5.76 kilowatts, capable of fully recharging a battery electric vehicle in at least 4 hours, and come with a level 1 and level 2 charging cord. So if you don't have a charging station in your home or have access to one, you'll at least be able to plug into a 120 or 240 outlet. They also have to come with DC fast charging ports as standard. Not all vehicles today, believe it or not, come with DC fast charging as standard. On some vehicles, it's still an option. Standardized data involves integration with OBD2, which has been standard on internal combustion engine vehicles since about 1995-96 range. But OBD2 isn't exactly standard for electric vehicles. Now it will be. And there's a requirement to make service information available so that repairs can be done by third parties, not just the manufacturers. And there's a lot here. And finally, there's a battery labeling requirement so that the batteries, the large traction batteries that are used in battery electric vehicles, will be labeled so that they can be more easily repurposed and recycled when the time comes to do something with that. So they'll know what the battery chemistry is for recycling and what its life cycle rating is so that it could be repurposed. And that should be the end of that.
Okay, thanks, Rob. We're going to come back to you in a few slides, I think.
Sure.
Okay, so moving on to the actual ZEV stringency proposed by, or adopted by CARB, I'm sorry. This is what it looks like, starting at 35% in 2026, moving up to 100% in 2035. So if we translate that to New Jersey's population, this slide is the result of some modeling done by ICCT, the International Council on Clean Transportation, under contract with NESCOM, our regional air organization. So the solid blue portion at the bottom is business as usual. So this is what we believe our electric vehicle registrations would look like through 2050 without an advanced Clean Cars 2 rule. The green lines, the green vertical bars show what we think the electric vehicle registration would look like as a result of advanced Clean Cars 2. And then the solid line across the top shows our current, in 2025, our current light duty vehicle population, and we're projecting it to increase slightly by 2050. So very steep trajectory there as a result of advanced Clean Cars 2 compared to business as usual. So how does that translate to environmental benefits? This is also the result of the work done by ICC2 under contract with NESCOM. So these are cumulative NOx and greenhouse gas emission reductions in 3 selected years, 2030, 2040, and 2050. So there are two groupings of flexibilities in the California rule. They're actually all in one section of the same section of the rule, but we've grouped them into non-EJ flexibilities and then EJ flexibilities. So nearly all of the flexibilities that you can see on this slide here were in Advanced Clean Cars 1, and they were carried over to Advanced Clean Cars 2 with some modifications here and there. So these flexibilities allow the manufacturers to transition into their compliance obligations. As you can see, there's a couple different categories of flexibilities within this category. They can earn credits for early compliance. They can sell additional plug-in electric vehicles in order to meet their goals. They can have fuel cell vehicles count towards their goal. They can use converted historical ZEV credits, and they could also bank and trade with other manufacturers that are in the participating Section 177 states. So we'll move on to the category that we call environmental justice flexibilities. So there are three categories of environmental justice flexibilities adopted in the CARB rule. The first one allows you to sell discounted ZEVs in community mobility programs. The second one is lower MSRP ZEVs. And then the third one is selling used EVs to dealerships that are participating in financial assistance programs. And there were two caveats associated with these EJ flexibilities in California's rule. EJ values earned in one state, so for example, in New York, cannot be transferred to New Jersey for a manufacturer to comply. And second, manufacturers can only use these EJ flexibilities for 5% of their annual sales requirement and only until 2031. So there were limitations placed on these flexibilities as well as the non-EJ flexibilities. So let's walk through some of the flexibilities here. So this is the first one, low and moderate income community mobility programs. So with this program, the manufacturers can earn additional credits by providing vehicles at a 25% MSRP discount to community-based clean mobility programs. The community-based clean mobility programs are defined in the CARB rule. They must provide access to clean mobility other than vehicle ownership. They must serve a community in which at least 75% of the population are disadvantaged or low income. And they must be implemented by a community organization or a public agency with support from a community organization. And this program is effective in California for the model year range that you see here, 2024 to 2031. The second, EJ flexibility, allows manufacturers to earn extra credits for selling ZEVs or plugins at a lower MSRP. So these MSRP values listed here are the initial MSRP values for the CARB program. California has a formula to adjust these annually for inflation. These flexibilities are effective in California for 3 model years, 2026 through 2028. And then the third and final environmental justice flexibility allows manufacturers to earn additional credits when they sell vehicles that are at the end of lease, so off lease, to dealerships that are participating in a financial assistance program, such as a point of sale incentive program. They can earn an additional credit if that off-lease vehicle is sold to a qualifying lower income consumer. So it's a two-part incentive program here. This program is effective for the 5 model years listed here in California. And there's also a fine print that the vehicles must have had an MSRP less than $40,000 when new. And again, CARB has a formula to adjust that initial $40,000 MSRP as the program progresses over the years. We're going to run through just a quick example of how one of these flexibilities might work. Actually, Rob is going to do this. And then we're going to pause for questions.
So just to give you an example of what this means in terms of the number of vehicles potentially involved, in New Jersey, a typical average annual sales from one particular motor vehicle manufacturer might be 42,000 vehicles. So say pick up large manufacturer, say Toyota as an example. They might sell 42,000 new vehicles in New Jersey, light duty vehicles. So that's their sort of their initial deficit, the number of vehicles they have to match up to for ZEV sales. So using 2030 as an example, their ZEV sales requirement is 68%, which means roughly 28,500 vehicles out of the 42,000 they sell have to be ZEVs, or they have to earn values equivalent to 28,560. So their use of EJ values is capped at 5% of the sales requirement. So they can only earn 1,428 values out of the 28,000 plus they have to earn. So if they used the community mobility program, which earns the most credit of all the EJ flexibilities, they would earn a half of an extra value per ZEV that they sell or introduce into that program. So instead of selling 1,428 vehicles, they could sell 952 vehicles into the community mobility program, earning 1.5 values per vehicle instead of 1 value per vehicle. So there are some pros and cons to this. If you look at it from the manufacturing perspective, they only have to sell 28,000 vehicles instead of 28,560, roughly, just doing the math quickly here. For the EJ programs, they get 500 clean vehicles introduced directly into their program, directly into their area, affecting the air quality in those EJ areas. So that's the way you can look at it. It's not a huge hit in terms of the number of vehicles that are sold, but it gets clean vehicles directly into the EJ communities.
Okay, we are going to pause now and ask you to raise your hand if you have general questions about the framework of Advanced Clean Cars 2 or any of the slides that we've presented so far. And then we're going to move into our specific discussion questions, which are, should we propose to adopt this rule? And then we have a question about the EJ flexibilities. I cannot see the order of people raising their hands. So Monica, could you call on people in the order that they've raised their hands, please?
Yes. First person is Ray Cantor, so you can unmute and ask your question.
Hi, thanks, Peg.
Hi, Ray.
Thanks for doing this. Couple quick questions. Does this apply to consumers who are buying cars in other states? How does that work out? If I wanted to go to Pennsylvania and buy a car, how does that work into this program? And then I'll just ask a second question as well, and you can answer them both at the same time. What happens if we're not meeting the targets?
Rob, do you want to take that first question?
I'll take the first question because we dealt with that in our current program. The point of enforcement, for lack of a better word on this, is when someone goes to title their vehicle in New Jersey. So if they've bought a vehicle out of state and it's not a California car, motor vehicles will flag it and send them over to us for a possible exemption if an exemption is worthwhile. Usually we grant it because it's an extreme circumstance, like somebody was traveling out of state and their car got totaled in an accident and they had to buy a new car in Georgia, for example, and bring it back to New Jersey and title it. We allow for that. It's a one-off. We do a few a year, but ordinarily, no.
If I could, I apologize. Maybe I'm confused. I thought the mandate was either on the dealers or the manufacturers, not on the consumer.
You're correct, but there's a point at which we catch vehicles that shouldn't be, like, for example, low emission vehicles, California cars, where we catch them in the process. The requirement here is twofold. It's one for only vehicles that are the internal combustion engine vehicles to be California certified, and two for the ZEV sales requirement. The ZEV sales requirement, you're right, is a manufacturer requirement. The consumer just buys what they want to buy. It's up to the manufacturer to sell a certain number of zero emission vehicles. What I was referring to is really the point where we would catch someone trying to bring in a non-California car.
Okay.
I'm sorry if I didn't answer that directly, but that's what I meant.
I get that. So then let me rephrase. My question is really only on the EV component of it. How is that enforced if I decided, I want to go to Pennsylvania and buy my ICE?
The way in which we track credits that are granted to the manufacturers for sales of ZEVs is that they have to be delivered for sale and then titled in New Jersey. So we would track it as a New Jersey vehicle. If you bought it in Pennsylvania but then titled it in New Jersey, it's being used in New Jersey. The manufacturer could get credit for that vehicle having been sold into New Jersey. Does that help you?
But if it's an ICE vehicle, again, I'm just trying to figure out, if there's a giant loophole that, people could just go to another state and buy their ICE and not buy their EV.
No, there isn't, because if it's an ICE vehicle, it would be caught during the titling process. And if it's a ZEV, we would track where it gets registered, and the manufacturer could still get credit for having sold it into New Jersey.
I get that you'll catch it. I'm just not sure whose violation it is. Is the manufacturer or dealer not allowed to sell it to me for registration in New Jersey?
They're not supposed to. If it's a Pennsylvania dealership and they know you're you're going to register it in New Jersey, by this regulation, by our existing regulation, they're not allowed to sell it to you unless it's a California car.
I don't want to take up more time. I have a lot more questions for later on.
Okay.
Okay, the next person is Eric. You can unmute and ask your question.
Peg, good morning. Rob, good morning.
Good morning.
I have a clarifying question and then a larger question. As of December 2020, there were 90,000 EVs registered in New Jersey, according to your slide, or just about 90,000?
2022, yes.
Yeah, 1222, I'm sorry. And of that, the bottom part showed that it looked like there were about 22,000 that are partial hybrid electric vehicles. So they have both an internal combustion engine as well as plug-in capability, correct?
That is correct. That's how we categorize them, yes.
Okay, so right now, even of the 90,000 EVs we have, a quarter of the 90,000 that the administration is qualifying as EVs, a quarter of them still have an internal combustion feature on them. So we have about 68,000 pure battery electric plug-ins registered as of 12/22.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, thank you. That's the clarifying question. The policy question is the legal authority for this regulation coming from the Clean Air Act, the Federal Clean Air Act, Section 177, or is the department putting this in place in anticipation of the Atkins Bill, Assembly Bill 5261 becoming law? And then I have a follow-up depending on which answer you have.
We have authority to adopt California's rules under the Clean Air Act, Section 177. You're right.
Okay, so if Section 177 were for some reason struck down, then you would need the separate authority of the Atkins Bill. All of this is predicated on California's waiver in defining greenhouse gases criteria, air pollutant, whether or not that. So all that stuff's going to be adjudicated by the Supreme Court, I would assume, eventually. So right now, the department is moving forward as if Section 177 authority will be upheld for California to regulate greenhouse gases. Got it. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Eric.
Okay, Brian Weeks, you can unmute and ask your question.
Thank you. My question is, who will bear the expense of ensuring the subsidies, for example, of selling the discounted EVs into the EJ communities? Is that going to be, for example, will the manufacturers need to reduce their profit, or is this seen as something to be subsidized, for example, out of one of the clean energy program charges through utility bills? What will be the source of that funding?
So California has different sources of funding for these flexibilities. We would have to figure out as a state and as a group of stakeholders where the funding would come from. It's not necessarily a DEP responsibility to identify funding for these programs. So that's a question that I think is to be determined. I think there are various ways that it can be done.
Because is that going to be part of the developing this rule to engage in that cost benefit analysis to determine, for example, whether individuals who do not own a vehicle would pay through their utility bill to subsidize the purchase of a vehicle? And what would be the effect on an EJ community, say, if those low-income people are subsidizing the purchase of electric cars through their electric bill?
Mm-hmm.
Will that be part of the rule development process, if you know?
I'm not sure. I'm going to ask my colleagues, Jung and Rebecca, that are on the phone if they want to weigh in on that. If not, I don't want to put them on the spot. I'm going to say, Brian, we might have a separate conversation with you on that. I don't know that we have a solid answer for today. Jung or Rebecca, is there anything you want to weigh in on this? No? Okay. Brian, we'll have to get back to you on that. That's a good question.
Thank you. Yeah, because I'm concerned this could be an expensive, this is going to cost somebody a lot of money. And I'm not, that's very important in order to make this happen. Okay. Somebody's got to come up with a lot of money.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, the next person is Bill Barron. You can unmute and ask your question.
Thank you. Just a quick question. Is there anything in ACC2 that restricts the sale of used ICE vehicles during this period? What happens to a used car? Is it allowed to continue to be sold and resold, or does it have to be scrapped?
There are no restrictions on used vehicles under our current LEV requirements or under the new ACC2 program. Used vehicles may continue to be bought and sold and traded as they have been historically.
Thank you.
Okay, Amy Goldsmith, you can unmute and ask your question.
Hi, I just wanted to know what the why there's a 2031 time frame on the flexibility for the EJ flexibility. As we know, the emissions in environmental justice communities is tremendous, and this number and this mechanism for getting cleaner air in EJ communities is helpful and important, but why not extend it and be more creative?
So that 2031 date is directly from the California rule, and like I said earlier, and I think you know this from all of our past dialogue,
right.
We're limited as to what portions of a California rule we can change when we're proposing to adopt.
So is there any thought, I understand that, but is there any thought about how to be maybe a little more creative in New Jersey beyond, the mandates of California? I know that your shop has tried to be creative within the confines of the rules, but any thoughts about?
I'm not sure. There actually, one of the discussion questions we were going to ask at the end is what can we do outside of this potential rulemaking to increase the benefits to EJ communities? So even though our authority may be limited under Advanced Clean Cars 2, we can certainly talk about separate programs, and maybe that's where the creativity comes in. I'm not an attorney, so I don't know if changing this 2031 date to 2035 would jeopardize the identicality requirement, but that's something we can take back and talk about internally. But let's say we can't change it, then I think we're resigned to looking at, or we're committed to looking at how we can potentially make changes in the EJ communities outside of this rulemaking.
Well, maybe in part this will be my last point, maybe in part looking at all the different zero emission. We just took a tour of New Jersey Transit and their buses, you know, the
Mhm.
electric buses that they have in Newton Garage down in Camden, you know, maybe looking at all the programs together and seeing how they fit together and what is the gap in
Right.
giving
Yep.
relief to people. Yeah.
Right,
I
doing a
assume they're
holistic
starting to do
analysis.
that, but maybe painting that picture a little bit better.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yep,
Thank you.
thank you.
Okay, Lisa Navarro, you can unmute and ask your question.
Hi, I just had a question on the discounted ZEVs in communities for the EJ flexibility, and I think the next slide had talked about support by agencies. But what can you just talk about that a little bit more and what maybe ideas you had there?
So I can describe the two programs that California has. So they have a clean mobility program. That's a first come, first serve, sort of small scale needs assessment program for communities. They have a second one called the Sustainable Transportation Equity Project. That's a competitive grant program, and they use that for large scale planning and capacity building grants to look at clean transportation in communities. They also have a clean mobility in schools program, which is very similar to that STEP program that I just mentioned, but it's for public school districts. So I think there's a different ways that these programs can be developed. They really are intended to be led by the community based on what the community needs. So I don't know that we have any preconceived ideas of what that would look like for New Jersey. I think we'd need to engage with the communities at their request because it needs to be led by the communities. To see what kind of program would best suit them. I think, you know, given all of my work in this space over the last maybe 10 years, I've come to recognize that the needs of a community are very different from one community to the next. So it could be that there are multiple community mobility programs that are designed to address different types of communities. I don't know that one program for the whole state would necessarily be the best way to approach this. But again, I don't know. I think we need to go into this keeping an open mind.
Okay,
and if you have
thanks.
ideas when we go to propose or adopt, I'd love to have them.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Lisa.
Okay, Zach Fabish, you can unmute and ask your question.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. My question kind of keys off the identicality requirement. Does the identicality requirement present any sort of opportunities for the department to move more quickly with the rulemaking to either adopt or choose not to adopt, hopefully choose to adopt advanced clean cars 2? I ask in particular, given the urgency of completing a rulemaking before the end of the year to ensure that New Jersey doesn't miss out on a model year applicability of the rule, which I think is pretty important. So, you know, and maybe this is something you're going to cover in a later session on the call, but, you know, what is the department's thinking in terms of timeline?
So I think our stated goal by the administration and then repeated by our assistant commissioner last week is our goal is to adopt by the end of the year so that we can capture model year 2027. But that is an extremely ambitious time frame for us to propose and adopt a rule, especially given all of the other rules and initiatives that were announced last week. But that remains our goal. Under the Clean Air Act, if we don't adopt this year, I don't think there is any flexibility to allow us to get model year 2027. It's a 2 model year lead requirement. Is that what you were asking? Did I answer your question?
Yeah, and I just wanted to underscore, of course, the urgency and acknowledge all the work that needs to take place. Just thank you.
Okay, thank you, Zach.
Okay, our next person is Stephen Marcus. You can unmute and ask your question.
Okay, good morning. I hope hope this is not off base, but level 2 charges are really unrealistic as far as the time it takes to charge a significant amount of charge. What's the plan, particularly in communities where people generally don't own their own homes? The disadvantaged communities are obviously the highest on that. What's in the planning to try to provide charging that is a reasonable expectation to have people convert over to pure EV?
Yeah, I completely agree with your observation and your concern. Level 2 is not necessarily the right approach for everyone, and we need really a tailored approach for residents of environmental justice communities as well as residents who do not own their own homes. So we are doing a couple different things in that space. We have a specific initiative to try to get chargers at multi-unit dwellings. That's to acknowledge that those residents don't own that home, but yet they still may want to purchase an electric vehicle. We are also providing funding for what we're calling clean mobility. That's funding for electric ride sharing and ride hailing to get residents access to that clean transportation, even if they cannot or choose not to own an electric vehicle. We have provided a significant amount of funding already for fast chargers in communities at public locations. There is a federal competition coming up that we plan to apply for as well under the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure funding program, where they will provide money for community charging as well as corridor charging. So I agree with your assessment. I think there's a lot of work that still needs to be done. I think we are moving in the right direction on that, but we still have a ways to go. I'm going to pause here for a second because our questions and comments seem to be going beyond just sort of factual questions on what we've presented already. So let me just pull up the prompt questions that we had for you all, and then we'll continue to call on people. But I just want to give you a sense of the kinds of things we're trying to tease out from today's discussion. So the first question, and probably the most significant, is should we move forward with proposing to adopt this rule? And what are the concerns and hurdles with doing that and implementation? And how can we mitigate those concerns? And then our second set of questions, kind of along the lines of what Amy Goldsmith had teed up a few moments ago regarding the EJ piece of this. So the questions here are, how can the environmental justice flexibilities be structured and or implemented to provide those environmental justice communities with tangible benefits from transportation electrification? So that's how can we use this rule to provide those benefits? And then the other way to think about it, are there ways outside of this potential rulemaking to increase the availability and feasibility of EV ownership in environmental justice communities? So those are our two sets of discussion questions. So we can go back to the hands that were raised, certainly, so that everyone can get their ideas and comments out in the open. But we'd also like you to think about these particular prompt questions and feel free to weigh in on them. So Monica, let's go back and continue with the calling on the people in the order that their hands were raised.
Okay, our next person is Doug O'Malley. You can unmute and ask your question.
All right, I think I'm unmuted. Thank you so much, Peg, for this presentation. Doug O'Malley, Director with Environment New Jersey. I actually just wanted, thank you for moving on to the discussion questions. I know we're only kind of halfway through the presentation, so I certainly want to answer the discussion questions, but I want to ask some additional questions that I essentially want to know if we're going to get to or not, and feel free to weigh in on. The first question is just if you could walk through just how much Advanced Clean Cars 2 adoption is directly linked to Governor Murphy's Executive Order 274, which was to reduce climate pollutants by 50% by 2030, as well as the adoption by the U.S. Climate Alliance of that goal, which New Jersey is part of. The second question is just if you could walk, and obviously flag if this is going to be part of the presentation later, just walk through the process from other clean car states on adopting and proposing these protections, because there's obviously been a number of states that have already started to move forward, not only with the rule proposal, but have already adopted these protections, some including our neighboring states. And then the third question is just to talk about the environmental impacts if we're not adopting these programs. So there was already a reference to model year 2027, and obviously the importance of proposing and adopting this rule this year so we don't miss that model year. I was wondering if there's data that DP will provide just on the amount of pollution that we would see if the model year is not attained with this program. So I have other kind of thoughts to the discussion questions, but I just wanted to flag those three issues up front.
Yeah, and let me just clarify, this slide deck shows 29 out of 55, but this is actually the last slide. The only one after this is the closing slide with a reminder of which email address to send comments to. The slides 30 through 55 were slides that we had used when drafting, and some of the other slides have specific prompt questions for our other focus groups. So this is actually the end of the presentation. So I'm sorry that it's showing up as we're only halfway through. We are actually done talking and ready to listen to you. So let's start with the questions in reverse order. So the first question, Doug, the environmental impacts of not adopting. I think we would go back to this slide here. These are the benefits if we adopt. So if we don't adopt, then these are the benefits that we're not getting. I think that's probably the easiest way to answer that question. Your second question, maybe I need a little clarification. I think you were asking how our process or timing compares to that of other states. Is that what your question was?
Yeah, just kind of where, if you just walk through other clean car states and kind of their processes of adopting and proposing the regulation.
So different states have proceeded in different ways. There are several states, Massachusetts is the one that stands out, that decided late last year to proceed with emergency rulemaking. Their statute allows them to do that. Other states have followed a more traditional proposal and adoption process. And when I say traditional, I'd say, the more time-consuming process where it takes 12 months or more to go from proposal to adoption. So I think there's a variety of approaches that the states have used. I don't recall off the top of my head, but I think there are probably half a dozen states that are moving forward with proposal and adoption, and several others that are considering it. I think they're all on different timeframes. Some of them are going to capture model year 2026, others will capture model year 2027, and then there's yet another group that is a little bit further behind that will be model year 2028 at the earliest. Could you repeat your first question? I think you were asking how it had to do with the governor's 2050 goals, was it?
Well, more specifically with the executive order 274 referencing the need to reduce climate pollutants 50% by 2030, which is in line with the U.S. Climate Alliance and the Biden administration and commitments from a multitude of other states.
Yeah, so this proposal will definitely help us get towards that goal of 50% by 2030. I haven't had a chance to completely look at it, but Rocky Mountain Institute just came out with a policy simulator tool, which is kind of interesting. And they did an analysis. Well, you could plug in any state. So you could look at New Jersey. And again, I haven't double checked their assumptions or inputs, but it's an interesting analysis that shows the impact that different policies, regulatory and energy related policies would have on getting us to our 2030 and 2050 goals. So I'm just throwing that out there because it was an interesting tool. I'm going to take a look at it further myself. But I think the short answer, Doug, is that this would certainly help get to the 50% by 2030 goal.
Super, Peg. And then I just wanted to jump in on the first, and in my mind, kind of the most important discussion question is, should DEP adopt the Advanced Clean Cars 2 program? And, you were referencing, really, I think your first slide was that classic story of where do our transportation emissions come from? The vast majority or the largest source of transportation of emissions in the state remains our transportation sector. It's more than 40%. And so, if we are serious about meeting the governor's climate initiatives, as well as preventing the worst impacts of climate change, the Advanced Clean Cars 2 program provides the best option for us to reduce our emissions the fastest. And I think it's also important to note here that a number of other states, our neighboring states, you referenced Massachusetts, New York has also adopted these standards in addition to Vermont, as well as Washington and Oregon. And then a number of our other neighboring states are in the process of proposing them. There's an announcement coming from Maryland later today. There's Connecticut that's moving forward, as well as other clean car states across the country. You know, and when we think about kind of the history of clean cars in New Jersey was the first state to legislatively adopt the Clean Cars program way back in 2004. And the reason was quite simple. Our air quality was out of compliance with the EPA. The American Lung Association still ranks a majority of New Jersey counties of having unhealthy levels of air quality. So really the Clean Cars program is our best weapon to be able to reduce not only climate pollutants, but also air pollution. And then this is also where the world has changed drastically from 2004. You know, we now have every major EV manufacturer in America selling and promoting electric vehicles. We have federal dollars that are coming in, which you're helping to get on the ground to increase EV infrastructure across the state. And we're also starting to see the cost reductions for available EVs really come down. And so when we kind of think about the future that New Jersey should be adopting for climate, for our air quality, and really just to be able to have be able to have a quality of life that's sustainable in the decades to come, we need to adopt clean cars too, and we need to adopt it as quickly as possible. So obviously New Jersey does have the stakeholder process, does not have emergency rules procedure, but the benefit of proposing and adopting Clean Cars 2 this year is paramount, because if we don't adopt it, we're going to literally see the loss of a loss of availability for more EVs in the state, and then it's also going to have direct clean air and climate impact. So that's why it's so imperative that the department, have listening sessions like today and others, but obviously listen to the science of the program, listen to the work of other states to move forward on this program this model year and this calendar year. Thank you.
Thank you for your support, Doug.
Okay, our next person is Ambrose at njpp.org. You can unmute and ask your question.
Thank you. Yes, I'm still learning Teams and still learning how to change my name. So you will be the first to know when I learn that. So thank you. My name is Alex Ambrose. I'm the Transportation and Climate Policy Analyst at New Jersey Policy Perspective. It seems like we've been talking about advanced clean cars for years, but these deadlines get closer and closer every time we talk about it, and they're no longer far off numbers. They're approaching quickly, and every day we don't adopt these rules is another day that we risk not meeting our own goals, the goals that are set by our own state. So just some statistics, if we enact this rule quickly, by the year 2050, we will see $4.6 billion in public health benefits due to reduced pollution. We will see almost 4,000 premature deaths avoided and almost 100,000 fewer asthma attacks. And in a state with record-setting asthma levels, unfortunately, that is a huge deal, particularly since the distribution of air pollution, as Doug pointed out, is not equally distributed throughout the state. But this will only happen if we adopt the entirety of Advanced Clean Cars 2 through 2035. And additionally, electric vehicles mean consumers will realize cost savings even after just the first year of driving. It can be over $2,500 just in that first year. So the beauty of this rule is that it gives customers choices and options when considering a vehicle purchase. Like you said, they can purchase a pre-owned traditional ICE vehicle or a new, safer, cleaner electric vehicle. And trying to reach the goals that our state has set out without this rule in place for this year is like fighting with one hand tied behind our back, and we are sabotaging ourselves. I hate to use this metaphor, but it's true. We're like an out-of-state driver that is stuck in the left lane right now, while other states are zooming past us towards the cleaner and healthier future. So we support New Jersey adopting Advanced Clean Cars 2 by April so that we can make it into the next model year. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex.
The next person is Kit Kennedy. You can unmute and ask your question.
Good morning, and many thanks to you, Peg, and to DEP for holding this hearing. My name is Kit Kennedy, and I'm the Managing Director of the Climate and Clean Energy Program at NRDC. NRDC is a national environmental advocacy organization that is very active here in New Jersey, and I'm joined at this hearing by Kathy Harris, Eric Miller, and Yetang Hwang, who will be submitting written comments as well. And our message to you today is that New Jersey should proceed to adopt Advanced Clean Cars 2 program by the end of this year. And this is crucial for protecting communities, public health, and the economy in New Jersey. We have all seen how the current impacts of climate change have impacted New Jersey and other states in the Northeast. We remember Superstorm Sandy and the devastation caused by that event to communities, particularly low-income communities in New Jersey, and there have been other impacts as well. They will worsen if we don't take action. New Jersey has a long record as a state climate leader across the country and has made, under this administration, many bold commitments to clean energy and goals to support electrification of transportation. But now is the time to put these statements, these goals, these commitments into practice and cement New Jersey's leadership by adopting ACC 2 by the end of the year. 7 other states have already adopted these regulations, and New Jersey's name is glaringly absent from the list of climate leadership states that have done so. Organizations from across the country, including NRDC, are looking at New Jersey to solidify its climate leadership and make it real and follow the path of states such as Vermont and New York that have already adopted the full regulations through 2035. The transportation sector is the largest emitter of greenhouse gas emissions in the country and in New Jersey, and zeroing out pollution from this sector will help to improve air quality and health, while saving drivers money and reducing pain at the pump. Failure to adopt this regulation in a timely way would mean that New Jersey and its residents will be delayed from reaping the multitude of benefits associated with the transition towards a zero-emission transportation future. And we need New Jersey to join other states and communities in recognizing and taking action to avert the worst of the climate crisis. This is also a great moment for New Jersey to take action, since EJA and IRA are bringing to New Jersey and other states hugely significant climate investments that can be used to support transportation electrification. So we hope that New Jersey will seize the moment to make the most of the federal dollars and adopt ACC 2. On the important issue of EJ communities and how to make sure that they fully benefit from this transition, NRDC supports the EJ flexibility programs. We also urge DEP to engage more deeply with the EJ community directly so that you're hearing their concerns, their needs, and looking at policies and programs outside of the scope of ACC 2 that can be used to make sure that New Jersey's EJ communities have full access to electrification, transportation benefits, and other clean transportation mobility benefits. I'll say to that point that we know that communities in New Jersey are suffering from poor air quality. In fact, 12 counties in the state, many of them EJ and disadvantaged low-income communities, are ranked as having amongst the worst air quality in the U.S. And finally, there are significant economic and jobs benefits associated with adopting ACC2, reducing the cost for drivers because ZEVs have significantly lower operating and maintenance costs than ICE vehicles, creating new jobs with increased wages relative to the jobs that will be replaced, and adopting the program will also put downward pressure on rates for all utility customers. Again, we'll be submitting written comments as well, and all of NRDC staff working in New Jersey would be glad to answer any questions.
Thanks, Kit, and thanks to Kathy and Eric for their ongoing dialogue and conversation on New Jersey specific issues. We appreciate that. We have about 20 people with their hands raised, and I want to make sure we get to everyone. So if we could try to stick to maybe 2 minutes per person. And just a reminder that we're hoping for a conversation. The formal proposal will potentially be coming in the coming months, and we'll do a more traditional hearing kind of process. So if you could just keep that in mind when you're giving your comments today, that would be helpful. Monica, go ahead. Who's next?
The next person is Richard Lawton. You can unmute and ask your question.
Great. Thanks, Monica. Thanks, Peg. And thank you for the presentation, all the good information this morning. Again, I'm Richard Lawton. I'm the Executive Director of the New Jersey Sustainable Business Council. We're a network of companies that are working together to advance a combination of market-driven innovation and policy change to create a more sustainable and equitable economy overall. And I've got a question. It kind of relates to the timing of the decision, and just to talk about the urgency of being able to hit that deadline. As has already been mentioned a little bit, the market trend's clear. 85% of the world's car market's already committed to 100% electrification in the next 20 years. So there's a huge upside opportunity for New Jersey in terms of growing jobs and sustainable economic development. But on the flip side, not meeting the deadline for this year also presents a big potential opportunity cost. So I guess my question, talk a little bit more about just the timing, because I know it's a tight window. We have a window of opportunity, and there's tremendous upside in making sure that we make the decision in terms of meeting that window. It sounds like a lot of the potential problems relate to administrative capacity. So I guess, could you talk a little bit about how those competing priorities are reconciled and how this would be addressed as part of that? Because I know you have a lot on your plate, a lot of work. So could you address that? Thank you.
Yeah, well, I think that's the question that we all have in our minds, and it's really an internal prioritization within DEP of all of the rules that we've just launched. Some of them have, deadlines like Advanced Clean Cars 2, where if we don't adopt by the end of the year, there are other rules that have federal implications or that, we're pursuing for other reasons. So it really is a balancing act. I'm not sure I have a better answer for your question other than that it remains our goal to adopt this rule by the end of the year. But between resources and the approval process, review and approval process that we follow within our agency with the Division of Law and with the Governor's Office, there are a lot of people that review our rules to make sure that they are robust before they go out for filing. And that's a necessary process, not to mention this stakeholdering that we're doing up front. So I know it's not a great answer, but it remains our goal to adopt by the end of the year. We'll do our best to make that happen.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Rich.
The next person is Allison. You can unmute and ask your question.
Hi, good morning. Thank you to the DEP staff for this presentation today and for the stakeholdering. My name is Allison McLeod. I'm the Public Policy Director for the New Jersey League of Conservation Voters. We advocate for clean air, clean water, and open space for all New Jerseyans. And I'll let one of my colleagues that's on today speak more to the environmental justice, but I just wanted, related to the discussion questions, Peg, to your first question is, should we move quickly? Wanted to say yes. As we all know, 42% of emissions are from the transportation sector. In the years since COVID, we've seen changes in commuting patterns, and we've seen people moving away from some of the mass transit and more single passenger vehicle cars on the road. And we know that these are more than just numbers, right? That this has real health impacts for folks. It has, as Richard just alluded to, it has business and economic impacts. And so, just in a short response to your question is yes, it's really important that New Jersey doesn't get left behind and that we continue, to push forward and to make sure that we can adopt this year so that we don't lose another model year. And to your point about, everyone's capacity, however, whatever we can do as advocates to be helpful, we are very strong supporters of DEP taking this action. Thank you. And we'll have more written comments as the process continues.
Thanks, Allison.
Okay, the next person is Stan. You can unmute and ask your question.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay,
Yes,
good,
we
very
can.
good. Thank you very much. And thank you, Peg, for putting this meeting together. My name is Stanislav Jarac. I'm the president of New Jersey Electric Vehicle Association, one of the about 100 chapters nationwide. We are all volunteers and we support electric vehicles on the ground. We are organizing events, communicating to people about the benefits of driving electric, and we do work with DEP in this. And DEP makes our events more impactful. So thank you so much. And we do urge DEP to adopt the ACC rule this year, or jokingly last year. My question, it's more rhetorical, but whether you can present us what are the EV sales in last year versus internal combustion electric vehicle sales. Also, what is the context of electric vehicle sales globally? Like more specifically, how much electric vehicles are being sold percentage-wise in Europe, in China, in Norway? And what are the other benefits of driving electric, speaking of national security, particularly in the context of what happened last year in Ukraine, right? Being dependable or not dependent on a foreign energy, being able to make the energy within the United States. I wanted to also make a comment about the EJ communities, because EJ communities these are the most difficult for us to reach, because they tend not to come to our events. And I wanted to suggest that maybe dealers would be accountable for providing the education, as opposed to suggesting that they should lower their profits to provide more sales of electric vehicles to EJ communities. And they should be more accountable, because what we experience is that dealers are those that are actually trying to sway people to buy gasoline cars versus electric. So I think that that's where they can help. And also, one of the previous speakers mentioned that level 2 is not suitable. And I respectfully disagree, because level 2 and level 1 charging is the equity charging. This is the affordable charging. The DCFC charging, the fast charging, is not equity charging. It is, and it will always be more expensive. The DC fast charging is suitable for road trips when we need to recharge quickly to keep running. If we want to address the problems of charging with EJ communities, we have to address it at the level 1 and level 2 charging capability. We have to make sure that wherever people from EJ communities park, we have to make sure that we build the level 1 or level 2 capabilities, charging capabilities. This is critical in our opinion. So yes, and there are so many benefits driving electric. There are personal, societal, the national security. I may have more comments and discussions later, but thank you for the time allowing me to speak.
Thanks, Dan.
Okay, the next person is Eve Gable Frank. You can unmute and ask your question.
Hey, Peg, thanks for holding this session. So on the first question that you all asked, my short answer is yes, I should adopt. My longer answer, and I think kind of the most important element of this, is that adopting this regulation is a necessary step that we have to take to achieve our EV adoption goals that New Jersey set. So Peg, you reviewed this earlier, but right now there are just over 90,000 EVs on the road in New Jersey. So we have to put over 200,000 EVs on the road to achieve that 2025 goal. There's a long way to go there. And the only way we're going to achieve these goals is by adopting advanced clean cars too, and quickly by the end of the year. The reality of this is manufacturers are going to prioritize supply of EVs to the ACC2 states. So if we don't adopt, New Jersey drivers will either go without EVs or be forced to travel to neighboring states to purchase the vehicles they want, which also has the added negative effect of moving economic activity out of the state. So adopting this regulation, we really see it as necessary to first ensuring that EVs are widely available to New Jerseyans, and also to achieving these clean energy and transportation goals that you all laid out. Thanks.
Thanks, Eve.
Okay, the next person is Ramon Cruz. You can unmute and ask your question.
Yes, hello. Well, good morning, everyone. And thanks for the opportunity to speak to you. I prepared a statement to submit also. My name is Ramon Cruz, and I'm the national president of the Sierra Club, the largest environmental organization with over 3.5 million members and supporters all over the country, and in New Jersey alone, over 80,000. I'm here today to express the urgency to which New Jersey must adopt these advanced clean cars. New Jersey is a clean car state and a national leader for climate action, and adopting this, with several neighboring states will continue to ensure that, New Jersey is a leader in the nation, and however, also most importantly, New Jersey owes it to its people, who have been suffering from decades of high pollution. And so it owes it to them, to have cleaner air. I know that I'm preaching to the choir here, but, in this, it is important to state that New Jersey needs help and the appropriate tools to reduce tailpipe pollution that contributes to respiratory irritants, like NOx and VOCs and particulate matter, and ultimately also ground level ozone. So one of these key tools would be exactly this rule. New Jersey must not be left out of the electric vehicle revolution that is already underway, and the auto industry is investing hundreds of billions of dollars globally, including 210 billion in the U.S. For EV and battery manufacturing. So, with the IIJA and the IRA, providing unprecedented levels of support for EVs, in the forms of loans, grants, and tax credits, that could really, support the production of zero emission vehicles, batteries, and chargers. So, ultimately, the electric revolution, is already here, and states, should get on board to offer their residents the consumer choice they want and deserve. So, just to conclude, my main points here are that New Jersey must adopt this, to continue to lead the EV market with consumer choice and accessibility at the forefront, but most importantly, in order to protect and provide cleaner air to its communities and become, a model for the rest of the nation. So thanks a lot.
Thank you, Ramon. And also thank you to your New Jersey leads for continuing to work with us on these issues.
Okay, the next person is Margaret. You can unmute and ask your question.
Hi, good morning. My name is Margaret. I'm with Zeem Solutions. We build and operate zero emission depots for fleets, light, medium, and heavy duty fleets. So we have shared charging for multiple vehicles. And to the first discussion question, yes, New Jersey should adopt Advanced Clean Cars 2. And I also just want to align our comments with Eve at Charge EVC and Allison at New Jersey League of Conservation Voters and the many other great comments and questions going on today. And I'll stop there because I think pretty much everything I wanted to say has been said, and I'll just echo that. Thanks.
Thanks, Margaret, and thanks for your work in New Jersey also.
The next person is Catherine Garcia. You can unmute and ask your question.
Thank you so much. Good morning. I'm Catherine Garcia, and I'm the director of Sierra Club's Clean Transportation for All campaign. Thank you so much for hosting the stakeholder meeting, and I've also prepared a brief statement to share today. I work with staff, volunteers, and partners from across the country to advocate for strong policies and programs that will slash pollution from combustion vehicles. I'm so grateful that New Jersey has already taken steps to curb transportation emissions by adopting strong state vehicle standards like the Advanced Clean Trucks Rule and the Advanced Clean Cars 1 program. But today I urge New Jersey to continue this course and address pollution from the light-duty fleet by adopting the Advanced Clean Cars 2 regulation this year. This work is deeply personal for me as a parent to a toddler whose favorite activity is running and climbing outside. And I think about the air he breathes in every day, like many parents out there. But I live in Washington, D.C., and like many densely populated counties in New Jersey, we also scored an F in the Lung Association State of the Air report. So we need to make sure we're doing everything we can now so that our families can have the best possible future. And the stark reality is that every combustion vehicle on the road adds decades of smog, climate emissions, and a perpetual reliance on the fossil fuel industry. And the good news is that today we do have a solution that can help us break this vicious cycle. The Advanced Clean Cars 2 is a common sense standard that is not only supported by many automakers, it's also directly aligned with commitments that leading manufacturers have made to go all electric. The 2035 target in the Advanced Clean Cars 2 rule would ensure market certainty and expand consumer choice for zero-emission vehicles in New Jersey. And it's important to note that we are currently in an epic moment of implementing the Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act and the Inflation Reduction Act. These investments, through a wide range of programs, will create a national electric charging corridor, install charging stations in underserved communities, provide tax credits for new and used clean vehicles, incentivize manufacturers to produce electric vehicles, and so much more. Additionally, in New Jersey, Governor Murphy is moving forward with a new goal for 100% clean electricity by 2035. We see this new clean energy program coupled with the ACC2 would be a force multiplier for cutting emissions in the state and providing a healthier future for families in New Jersey. So, in conclusion, this is the moment for strong climate action and national leadership. It's imperative that New Jersey adopt the Advanced Clean Cars 2 standard this year to ensure that by 2035, all new cars sold in the state are zero emission. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Catherine.
The next person is Tom Van Heek. You can unmute and ask your question.
Thank you. Good morning. Tom Van Heek with Rivian Automotive. We manufacture all electric SUVs, pickups, and electric delivery vans. As a manufacturer producing vehicles that meet the requirements of the ACC2 regulations, just want to stress the feasibility of the rules this morning. And from our perspective, the imperative of acting with urgency to adopt the rules in full this calendar year. It's crucial in our perspective to establish a pathway to 100% EV sales in regulation for the state, not just for the purposes of achieving climate goals and achieving prescribed emissions reductions targets, but also for investment certainty and planning, both within the auto industry and then in sort of adjacent industries, whether it's charging providers or utility grid planning and so on and so forth. One of the core purposes of the rule is to provide a clear, well understood glide slope that everyone can build and plan around in their businesses. So with that in mind, we are concerned about the potential impact of as much of a 2 model year gap between California's rules coming into force and those in New Jersey, assuming that a rulemaking could slip into next calendar year. So just want to reiterate our strong encouragement that the state pursue this and finalize this before the end of December. With that in mind, one quick question: is there any information yet that you can share, and apologies if I missed it, on any milestones to look out for from here going forward? When might a notice and comment period be triggered? Those kinds of things would be helpful for our planning purposes, because we'd certainly want to engage fully in the rulemaking as an interested stakeholder. Thanks.
Thanks, Tom. No, we did not put out a timeline, so you didn't miss that. We're going to allow written comments to our mailbox through April 15th, I think our date was. Let me see, April 15th. Yes, April 15th. So the proposal would be obviously at some point after that. We don't have a exact time frame yet for when we might be able to get a proposal out.
Got it. Thanks.
Okay, the next person is Anjuli Ramos. You can unmute and ask your question.
Yes, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you fine.
Okay, great. Hi, Peg. Hi, Rob. Hi, DEP. Thank you so much for this stakeholder meeting and for the question of, should we adopt advanced clean cars? My short answer is yes, absolutely, as soon as possible. And my longer answer is that, by adopting this rule and these standards, it would obviously provide an enormous relief to New Jerseyans suffering from dirty air and health impacts caused by the transportation pollution. As you pointed out, Peg, earlier in the presentation, the transportation the transportation sector is the biggest sector contributing to greenhouse gas emissions, but it's also a sector that significantly contributes to co-pollution of air toxics that makes our communities sick every day, particularly those communities intertwined in heavily trafficked roads and highways. When you have a state like ours that serves as a major transportation link between 2 major cities like New York City and Philadelphia, and with thousands, if not millions, of our residents commuting in and out of the state on a daily basis, New Jersey has so much to benefit from, adopting and continuing to adopt, right? Because we have Clean Cars 1. So continuing this path and adopting Advanced Clean Cars 2 by the end of this year, and effectively putting us in a position to transition out of our dependence on fossil fuels. Specifically, a Sierra Club analysis shows that by adopting Advanced Clean Cars 2 in New Jersey this year, it would result in a reduction of CO2 emissions by 72% below the 2021 levels, and this would be achieved by 2035. And an 80% reduction for NOx emissions, 72% reduction of particulate matter, PM 2.5 to be specific, and 73% for SO2. These are massive air quality improvements and greenhouse gas reduction. This is why it is imperative for New Jersey to propose and adopt this regulation by the end of this year so that we don't miss another model year. And, as mentioned by many of my colleagues before, by adopting this regulation, New Jersey will greatly benefit from contributing to and leading in the EV market, bringing economic and job benefits, expansive consumer choice, which is a huge thing for New Jersey. And one of my favorite parts of this rule is that it would kickstart the used vehicle market for EVs in the state. So the quicker we go into Advanced Clean Cars 2, the quicker the used vehicle market will be developed here in New Jersey and providing more options for people that not necessarily can afford an expensive EV as of now. So I urge the DEP to propose and adopt this rule by the end of the year. And thank you so much for all the work that you're doing. It's greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next person is Isabel Molina. You can unmute and ask your question.
Good morning. My name is Isabel Molina, and I am the Environmental Justice Policy Associate with New Jersey LCV. My colleague Allison had touched on a lot of the high-level points for the first question, which is really that we do support ACC2 and moving forward with it in a very timely manner, namely finalizing the rule by the end of this year. And so new research has shown that combined with 90% clean energy, with a 90% clean energy grid, electrifying all new cars and trucks by 2035 would prevent 150,000 premature deaths and avoid 1.3 trillion in environmental and health costs in 2030. And the BPU's ratepayer study confirmed that switching to electric vehicles, in addition to electrifying our grid, is not only good for our health and climate, but can also make good economic sense as well. And so touching on the second piece of your question, which was how can we support environmental justice communities in particular, I think it's important to note that not everybody will be a future car owner, and that's for a lot of different reasons, but people rely on transportation in a lot of different ways. And so making sure that ACC2 allows for those who will be potential car owners to access that financially and through good charging infrastructure like the multi-unit dwelling program is a really important way to provide those benefits to future car owners. But for those who won't be future car owners for a number of reasons, including the fact that they just financially cannot afford it, it is important to consider other options like car sharing, electrifying our transportation, and other e-mobility options. So I just want to highlight that and mention that it's important, you know, environmental justice communities in New Jersey are not a monolith. So it's important to consult with these communities to find out what would best suit their needs in terms of mobility. Thank you.
Thank you, Isabel.
The next person is Allie Gold Roberts. You can unmute and ask your question.
Thank you so much, and it's great to be with you all this morning. I'm Allie Gold Roberts. I'm the Senior Director of the State Policy Program at Ceres, a national sustainability nonprofit that organizes businesses for innovative climate and energy policy, or BICEP. This coalition of more than 80 major businesses, including some of the most recognizable brands in the U.S., have become leading advocates for pushing policies that mitigate the financial and material risks of climate crisis. We believe New Jersey should adopt Advanced Clean Cars 2 this year, to answer the immediate question. And in order to demonstrate their support for ACC2 adoption, 49 major companies, healthcare systems, and investors signed on to a letter that was submitted ahead of time and organized by Ceres to express their support for ACC2 in New Jersey. This, is a helpful resource for the conversation, but really indicates the support from folks like Hackensack Meridian Health, Hugo New, IKEA USA, Lyft, and others. And they see adopting strong vehicle standards as necessary and feasible, with the potential for significant climate, economic, and public health benefits in New Jersey and across the United States. And we look forward to participating in the future comment processes as well. And in the interest of time, I'm happy to yield the rest of my time to the other folks. Thanks so much, Peg.
Thanks, Allie.
Okay, the next person is Sean Fackler. If you can unmute and ask your question. Sean?
Here we go. Yes, can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can hear you just fine.
Okay now. Thank you. Yeah, two things. Been focusing. So I'm Sean Fackler from Technologies, where we are manufacturing gas sensors to implement emissions standards, these more stringent emission standards, which are part of the Advanced Clean Cars 2. And there are these requirements for the light duty vehicle with these more stringent, they call them non-methane organic gases and oxides of nitrogen, right? So NOx is still required regulation under ACC2. And my first question is, what is the New Jersey body that's responsible for ensuring that part of ACC2 to make sure that the remaining internal combustion engine fleet continues to reduce those emissions? Just to give you an example why this is important, a single legacy vehicle with a poorly maintained or tampered emissions system can emit 10 times more emissions than these new vehicle requirements. And my second question, and this is a policy issue in terms of implementing ACC2, is a real opportunity for New Jersey to repeal this policy from Governor Chris Christie's time in office, where there's an exemption for new cars for 5 years, and they don't have to get a emissions check. And in answer to the question about implementation, I believe this dealer new car waiver program should be repealed in the interest of implementing this ACC2, and I've been in conversation with auto services shops that find that vehicles which were under this program had tampered emissions systems, and therefore you can only assume we're emitting over the limit for many years. And I want to, of course, recommend ACC2, the adoption of it in New Jersey, and also give this particular input to the state about forming this dealer new car waiver program in order to be consistent with the emissions requirements for ACC2 moving forward on the existing and the remaining and legacy internal combustion engine vehicles in the state's fleet. Thanks so much for the time to speak, and thanks so much to the organizers as well.
Thanks, John. So just a quick answer to your two questions. In terms of the 5-year new vehicle exemption, that's a New Jersey Motor Vehicle Commission rule. We don't, that's not under our purview. So you would have to work with New Jersey Motor Vehicle Commission on that. Your second question was who makes sure that the internal combustion engine vehicles on the road are as low emitting as possible. That I'm paraphrasing your question. We do have a pretty strong inspection and maintenance program where all vehicles go through inspection at a frequency designated by our Motor Vehicle Commission. New Jersey DEP sets the test procedures and standards, but they are ultimately implemented by the New Jersey Motor Vehicle Commission and their contractor, which currently is Parsons. So it's sort of split responsibility for that.
Understood. So New Jersey DOT doesn't have involvement there.
No, it's New Jersey Motor Vehicle Commission.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next person is Carla Sosa. You can unmute and ask your question.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Carla Sosa. I'm here with the Environmental Defense Fund. And I think I just want to echo some of what the other folks on this call have said. Right, from our perspective, it's really critical to adopt this rule quickly, right? Only if we really adopt this rule will New Jerseyans see significant reductions in transportation pollution. In addition to what some of the other folks have also mentioned, right, that these standards will generate local jobs, or should in any case, and bring transportation costs down for families, and push forward, state and climate goals. So that's, to answer to your first question, I think the feeling we have, and I think a few other folks have, is the main concern is just getting it done this year, right? So that we can see those benefits as quickly as possible for New Jersey. So I'll leave it at that so other folks have a chance to speak, but thank you for all the work that you're doing. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Carla.
Okay, the next person we have is Juliana. If you want to unmute and ask your question.
Yes, my name is Juliana Garefa, and I'm here as a private citizen from Northern New Jersey and a member of the Natural Resources Defense Council Action Fund. I emphatically support the adoption of the ACC2 standards as quickly as possible, definitely by the end of this year. These ACC2 standards and manufacturer credits are crucial for the economic success of the vehicle industry as a whole in New Jersey. I'm sure I'm not the only consumer who will happily go out of state to purchase an affordable electric vehicle if it's not available here. But even more importantly, ACC2 affects far more than dollars and cents. Transportation emissions account for 46% of greenhouse gas emissions in New Jersey, which is the highest percentage of any sector. I personally have a dysfunctional heart valve caused by an infection I had as a kid, and prolonged exposure to air pollution weakens my heart further. So, and I can't emphasize this enough, every year New Jersey delays adopting ACC2 puts me a year closer to needing surgery for a new heart valve. So please, I implore you, propose and adopt ACC2 in its entirety by April 15th of this year to ensure adoption of the rule by the end of this year, so you can help protect people like me from the public health consequences of transportation air pollution.
Thanks for sharing your personal experience, Juliana.
Okay, the next person is Elizabeth Curcio. You can unmute and ask your question.
Thank you so much. I'm Dr. Elizabeth Churcheo. Thank you for allowing me a chance to speak on behalf of my patients and my community. As a physician practicing in an EJ community, I can assure you that there's no more pressing need than improving the health of our communities. My views don't necessarily reflect those of my employer, but health is foundational to any economic activity, any growth, and any flourishing. And the sooner it is adopted, the sooner our communities can breathe clean air. We know that 99% of the world still breathes unhealthy air based on the WHO standards, which are more evidence-based than the higher thresholds of the EPA. Even with the more lenient EPA thresholds, the majority of New Jerseyans live in counties that don't meet federal EPA clean air standards. And New Jersey transportation, as we heard, is a leading source of air pollution. We know that New Jersey is home to almost 800,000 adults and children with asthma, and that dirty air increases incidence and severity of disease. In the UK, they now actually ascribe air pollution as a cause of death where appropriate. And we don't have that ability yet in the United States, but we know that there's a strong association with air pollution and cancer, stroke, lung disease, heart attack, CHF, autoimmune disease, cognitive decline, diabetes, and as we already heard, other forms of cardiovascular disease. There's excellent research pointing to 1 in 5 premature deaths being attributable to fossil fuel pollution out of the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health. And this is especially true for communities of color. A person of color in the US is 61% more likely to live in a community with a failing air pollution grade. It's certainly easy to see these as just statistics, but I take care of these patients. I can see the panic when they're having asthma exacerbations or heart attacks, and it's painful for me to discharge these patients back into polluted communities, which I know will continue to negatively impact their health. And the benefits of an immediate transition to clean vehicles are enjoyed locally. The longer we wait, the more patients pour into our ERs and our hospitals. These are real patients, not statistics, and we have the ability to prevent this. We have a fundamental right to clean communities and to healthy air. Please adopt the full Act 2 rule, and please continually recenter these discussions on health. Thank you so much for organizing this.
Thank you, Doctor.
The next person is Kenny Montilla. If you want to unmute and ask your question.
Hi, can everyone hear me? Fantastic.
Yes.
Thank you again for giving us the chance to be here and for holding this very important meeting. My name is Kenny Montilla. I'm a Senior Government Relations Manager at Turo. For those who are unfamiliar with Turo, we're the world's largest peer-to-peer car sharing platform where New Jersey residents make their vehicles available for folks who need them. Several studies in the past have shown that car sharing reduces the need for personal vehicle ownership. A lot of folks are valuing access over ownership nowadays due to the cost. And this helps reduce the need for parking spaces and in turn reduces GHG emissions by encouraging the sharing of vehicles. In addition to reducing the need for personal vehicle ownership, I think Turo is uniquely positioned to support the state's environmental justice and broad EV goals, generally speaking. Last year, we submitted comments to the Board of Public Utilities explaining how our community of users, the majority of which identify as minorities, can specifically help tackle the challenge of introducing EVs to underserved communities. Just to share some statistics on some surveys that we conduct for New Jersey host and guest community. Over 6.5% of the vehicles offered across the U.S. on the Turo platform are EVs, which doesn't sound like much, but compared to the 1% of vehicles in the U.S. that are EVs, that's a significant difference. I believe the number in New Jersey specifically is 7%. In addition to that, part of our survey, part of what we discovered is the fact that nearly 70% of the respondents indicated that they would book an EV on Turo to test drive it and have it for an extended period of time. And of that, 70% of folks said that they intend to purchase an EV within the next 5 years. So when we think about introduction, access, affordability, we feel like we can help support the state's goals. Earlier in this conversation, there were some allusions to incentives provided for ride hailing and ride sharing programs. I think it'd be great to consider adopting similar incentives for car sharing. And I'd be more than happy to have follow-up conversations with DEP or whoever would be interested in having the conversation to see how we could be a tool in the toolbox. With that, I'll yield my time and thank you all for the time.
Thank you, Kenny, for telling us about your company. I am not familiar with it, so look forward to learning more.
Okay, the next person is Deborah Coyle, if you want to unmute and ask your question.
Holding this meeting. My name is Deborah Coyle. I'm Executive Director of New Jersey Work Environment Council, and we're a coalition of labor, community, environmental organizations. And like many others on the line, we're supportive of ACC2, and we like to see it adopted as soon as possible so we don't miss out on another model year. One of your slides showed some of the policies and programs you currently have in place so New Jersey can meet our clean energy goals. And clearly this would be another tool in the toolbox. And without this, we're not going to be close to meeting our clean energy goals. And this is also, by adopting this, is another way to think about building a green economy with all the, with all the computer chips and such that go into electric cars. Is there a way, if we move quickly, New Jersey can capture some of that as well? And as somebody else previously stated, infrastructure is starting to be really built out for electric vehicles. And one of the concerns that we have is, for my organization, is if we don't move quickly, we certainly don't want to have the infrastructure and then have the need and the desire for New Jerseyans to buy electric cars and not being able to get access to them. I think that's another reason why it's important that we move quickly so we don't lose out on a model year. And as the previous speaker, a couple before me, was talking about the health benefits, as you had stated in the beginning, and I think we all know on the line, the amount of greenhouse gas emissions that come from the transportation sector. So by moving forward, it's good for health, the climate, and also I think there's going to be some economic benefits. So really kind of want to see at this time the investment. It's not time to, step away from this, as, it's really time to move forward and to go ahead and let's adopt ACC2 as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Thanks, Jen.
Okay, the next person is Sean Moen, if you want to unmute and ask your question.
Morning, Peg. Sean Moen here from Tri-County Sustainability. We are the regional hub for the 101 towns, 10 legislative districts, and 1.2 million residents of Burlington, Camden, and Gloucester counties. As always, thank you to the good men and women of the DEP for all you do for us on a daily basis. Quick sidebar. For these programs to truly be successful, we're probably going to have to revisit the relationship of manufacturers to dealers here in New Jersey. We may have to look at changing the direct sales rules. Short and sweet, I quickly want to join the chorus of organizations calling for the quick implementation of ACC2. Here in the Philly suburbs, we continue to get failing grades from the Lung Association and are quite literally sick of it. We're trapped between I-95, Route 130, and the Turnpike. We're choking. Light-duty vehicles are a big contributor. We now have the tools to fix it. We urge DEP and the administration to continue our state's clean air leadership by adopting ACC2 as soon as possible. No more Fs for Camden. No more Fs for Camden. Thank you.
Thanks, Sean.
The next person is Dave Pringle, if you want to unmute and ask your question.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes, we
Okay,
can.
great. Thank you. Hi, actually, it's not a question, it's a comment. David Pringle, I'm representing Empower New Jersey. Today, I put this statement in the chat, but I want to say it out loud and elaborate a little bit. New Jersey has to adopt this year in time for the model year 2027. We have the legal and moral obligation to do so. It's the law, the 2004 New Jersey Clean Cars Act, and internal combustion engines are a major cause of climate emergency and the poisoning of lungs, especially in overburdened communities. And we're so behind. Notwithstanding assertions to the contrary, 5 states have already adopted this rule last year in time for model year 2026, who are more than a year behind them, and 5 other states are ahead of us in getting it done this year. We're not a leader of the pack here. We're behind the pack and we have to catch up. I'm sure several of the DEP folks today are at the DEP building. 19 years ago, I was at the DEP building on the first floor with my 7-year-old daughter holding my 5-year-old son, standing shoulder to shoulder with Governor Greevey, Senate President Bennett, and Congressman Adler, rest his soul, as the Clean Cars Act was signed into law. It requires us to adopt the strongest standards each time they're updated. Governor Murphy has to catch up with other states and advance clean cars this year in its strongest form. It shouldn't be up for debate. The rule should have already been proposed. So let's get it done now. The climate emergency demands it. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
Okay, the next person is Rudy, if you want to unmute and ask your question or make your comment. Rudy, are you there? Okay, we'll come back to him or her. So the next person is Drew Tompkins. You can unmute and make your question or make a comment.
Thank you for the opportunity to make a comment today. My name is Drew Tompkins with the Jersey Renews Coalition, a coalition of community-based organizations, environmental groups, and labor unions. And we just want to add our support and join the chorus of all the other groups on here today, calling for ACC2 to be adopted by the end of this year so we don't miss another model year. As you've heard from the other comments, ACC2 is good for our communities, specifically the health. It's good and important in our fight against climate change. And it also opens up many opportunities for our economy as well. And so with that, I will yield any more time and thank you again for the opportunity.
Thanks, Drew.
The next person is Aviva Gaines. If you want to unmute and make your comment or ask a question.
Yes, thank you very much. Good morning, and thank you, Peg and the DEP for allowing us to participate in this conversation. And I appreciate all the impressive comments offered by the other participants. I'm a pediatric physical therapist with a long history as a school-based physical therapist and a member of the Clinicians for Climate Action of New Jersey. And as to question number 1, yes, absolutely, we need to adopt the ACC2 as rapidly as possible and by the end of this year. I just want to add, we've already spoken of the climate and the health ramifications of vehicular emissions, as well as the economic benefits of adopting this standard. There are also educational consequences. We know that pollutants and particulates and ozone produced by internal combustion affect our health and our children's health. Though somewhat improved, the American Lung Association still says that most counties in New Jersey have poor air quality, and this exacerbates the respiratory illnesses like asthma and seasonal allergies. The New Jersey Health Department estimates that 8.7% 167,000 children in New Jersey have been diagnosed with asthma. The Environmental Defense Fund has reported that 1 in 4 children in Newark have asthma. Asthma results in significant number of school absences, and school absences translate into decreased learning. Asthma also affects children impaired with additional disabilities, adding to their burden and decreasing their ability to access school services. I've witnessed this in my school-based practice. I've worked with children with disabilities who've been unable to participate in physical therapy or even school due to asthma, severe allergies, and other respiratory conditions that are aggravated by poor air quality. So it is essential that we do not hesitate to adopt the most stringent standards our technology can supply. Delaying just adds to the problem. Every day we postpone, we are poisoning the well that supplies the air we breathe. And the accident is already happening. Let's slam the brakes on transportation emissions. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks, Aviva.
Our next person is Mike Sailback. If you would like to unmute and state your comment or ask a question.
Thanks a lot. Good morning. My name is Mike Sealback, and I'm the National Assistant Vice President for State Policy for the American Lung Association. We are adding our voice and strong support for adopting the ACC2 standards as quickly as possible. You've heard from many of my colleagues with many statistics, both Lung Association ones and others, but just to reiterate some additional points, we have found in our State of the Air report that approximately 4 million people in New Jersey live in communities impacted by unhealthy air. And these pollutants could lead, as you've heard, to asthma attacks, heart attacks, strokes, and other lung and cardiovascular diseases. We also know that climate change is a major threat to clean air progress and is amplifying a wide range of negative health consequences. Implementing ACC2 will drive real-world emission reductions needed to secure cleaner air and reduce carbon emissions. We released a report called Zeroing on Healthy Air, and we found that in New Jersey, a transition to zero-emission transportation and vehicle technologies, including the schedule for 100% zero-emission passenger vehicle sales by 2035, we could yield over $43 billion in public health benefits, avoid almost 4,000 premature deaths, avoid over 90,000 asthma attacks, and reduce the amount of work days lost by $464,000. By 464,000 days. So we want to see the ACC2 programs implemented without delay. We encourage a greater emphasis on complementary policies to ensure the broader and more equitable distribution of the benefits of this transition, including targeted incentives, certainly widely accessible charging infrastructure, and other equity-centered interventions. Thanks a lot for the opportunity to speak and for all you're doing to support healthy air. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Okay, our next person is Kathy Harris. You can unmute and make your comment.
Thank you very much. I know we're approaching the top of the hour, so I will be brief. My name is Kathy Harris. I'm a senior advocate on clean vehicles and fuels for the Natural Resources Defense Council. My colleague Kit spoke earlier about many reasons why we encourage and urge the state to adopt ACC2 this year. Getting into some of your more specific questions, Peg, that you have raised here, I wanted to highlight the fact that the Advanced Clean Cars 2 regulation is specifically focused on new vehicle purchase. purchases. But we also know that the majority of drivers in New Jersey and throughout the country purchase their vehicles used. So I wanted to highlight the fact that, the sooner that New Jersey adopts ACC2, the sooner that these clean vehicles will be able to enter into the secondary market. And based on some analysis by Schulock Consulting, we've found that failure to adopt the rules this year would mean that over 90,000 zero-emission vehicles would not be on New Jersey's road by 2030. So the cost of delay is about 90,000 zero-emission vehicles. And not only does that mean that that's 90,000 vehicles closer or that are not on the roads to help New Jersey achieve their goal, but that's also 90,000 fewer electric vehicles that are entering the secondary market where the majority of New Jerseyans purchase their vehicles. And we want to ensure that everybody has access to clean, affordable vehicles as their choice of transportation. And then just quickly on the environmental justice credits piece, we encourage New Jersey to support and uplift the limited environmental justice credits that are within the regulation. All the other states that have adopted the regulation so far have included these provisions within their regulation. And in New Jersey, there's a diverse set of funding that can help uplift these programs and encourage the state to do that, like RGGI, the Clean Energy Fund, and other things to help ensure that community car share programs in particular are effective in the state. But in developing and supporting these programs, we urge you to ensure that they are targeted to help support communities that have been historically overburdened with the transportation pollution. And with that, I will yield my time. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Kathy.
Okay, our next person is Thomas Boylan. If you would like to unmute and make your comment or ask a question.
Hi, good morning, and thank you to DEP for hosting this workshop this morning. My name is Thomas Boylan. I am the Regulatory Director at the Zero Emission Transportation Association. ZETA is an industry-backed coalition of member companies aligned with the full goal of transportation electrification. Our members span the entire EV supply chain from vehicle OEMs, EV charging providers, battery manufacturers and recyclers, electric utilities, and critical mineral developers. I know many other commenters have already spoken on this, and I'll just echo our support for New Jersey to adopt ACC2 rules by the end of this calendar year. And I think many of the other commenters have provided very good justifications for that. I just wanted to, I guess, as we wrap up here, Peg, I know you mentioned earlier on the call that resource constraints and internal prioritization are probably could be sources of delay that would push us into the next calendar year. And so I think, listening to the other commenters here, I think it's pretty clear you have a very supportive group of stakeholders that are all, I would say, almost unanimously aligned in seeing this rule finish by the end of the year. So I just wanted to ask you, what can we do? I think you have this resource available to you. How can we help you in your work, support your work? I know you have regulatory processes, and I'm sure many of us will look to weigh in on that. But can you sort of speak to what more we can do beyond just speaking at hearings and submitting comments? Where are the areas that you could find most value for us, outside of the DEP? Thank you.
Thanks for that offer. I'm not sure there's any feasible way for you to help us unless I assign each of you a section of the rule to write, but we know that's not feasible. But let me think about whether there are ways sort of on the side that we might be able to take advantage of your offer. Thank you, Thomas. So we have 1 minute left and 3 people in the queue, and I know I would like to end right at 11 because I have another meeting, and many of you do as well. Monica, who else is in the queue to speak? Are there anybody that hasn't spoken yet?
One more person.
Okay.
Yeah. So we have Eric Bloomgren. If you would like to unmute and state your comment or ask a question.
Yeah, thank you. I'll be real quick because we'll submit written comments too. But just coming at the end to kind of spoil things a little bit. But we're from the New Jersey Gasoline Convenience Store Automotive Association. So we're the trade group that represents the owners of most of the existing motor fuel retailers. Our members are entirely independent businesses and mostly small businesses. The majority of the state's stations are run by a single site operator. And we haven't had any objection over the years to the various incentives to promote EVs and charging stations. We have members who have been approved already for grant money to install EV fast chargers, and I'm sure many more will be adding them as well. And in a lot of ways, we're agnostic to the type of motor fuel that we sell. But we do have to oppose the adoption of this policy of a full government ban on a product which currently makes up about 95% of the new car sales market. We just think it's fundamentally unfair for consumers to be completely denied this option by the state. The transition should be done entirely through incentives to consumers, through free citizens making the choice for themselves based on what makes sense for their life and for their family and for their budget. And I know we're up against time, so I'll just leave it at that. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks, Eric. I'm going to just close with this slide. You could see the email address here, njairrulesmobile@dep.nj.gov. If you could submit any additional comments you have by April 15th, that would be great. If there are people on the line, I'm not sure who the two other people with their hands raised are. Happy to talk to you separately. Give me a call, send me an email. Also happy to set up a separate meeting if you feel like your concern or question warrants a little more time. So with that, we're going to close. Thank you all so much for spending the first 2 hours of your Monday morning with us today. Thank you.